Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our FabFems Friday with Women in STEM. Our focus today is on some professional skills related to delivering quality work with agility, and we have a spotlight on petroleum and geosystems engineering. So I'm excited to welcome some fabulous panelists today. We have one more FabFems Friday next Friday, so be sure you come back for one more of our series this summer. I'm Trisha Berry. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director for Women in STEM within the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement at UT Austin. You can find many of our FabFems role models, as well as many other FabFem role models on the FabFems.org National STEM Role Model Database. You can search for role models on all kinds of different criteria like zip codes, field of work, ethnicity, interest in engineering or other STEM fields, and so many different options to connect with other fabulous STEM role models to continue your exploration. The FabFems directory is managed by the National Girls Collaborative Project and is designed to help increase that career awareness and interest in STEM. So I hope that you do check that out. And I will throw in the chat our links to Sachi's already on it. She's got it going. Thank you, Sachi. Also, I want to make sure that you are aware of where we're putting all of these webinars, as well as other FabFems webinars that you perhaps haven't had the chance to join in on, or if you want to check this one out later and share it. Our UT WiSTEM YouTube channel has a FabFems Friday playlist, as well as other STEM role models that are featured in a variety of short videos. So I encourage you to check that out and check back frequently for other videos that we share. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out and stop sharing my screen so that we can move into our fabulous panel. So again, today our focus is on professional skills, deliver quality work with agility, and a spotlight on petroleum engineering. And I'm super excited to also give a shout out to Shell. Shell is one of our fabulous supporters and a longtime supporter of our We at UT summer camp. So thanks again to Shell, and thanks to Mackenzie and Emily for joining us today. We're going to have each of them introduce themselves, and then we're going to have some pre-selected questions that I will share with our panelists. And then we'll also be taking questions from you. So please be sure to join in the Q&A area of this webinar to submit your questions at any time. We're going to have plenty of time for you to ask questions as well. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let Mackenzie and Emily introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are and where they're from and their engineering degree, and maybe also share a hobby or something outside of work that you like to do. Mackenzie, do you want to get us started?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Mackenzie Fountain. I work at Shell. I've been there for about 4 years. I graduated from UT Petroleum Engineering in 2018. I did a minor in French, and I did the Global Business Foundation certificate. And I am a subsea completions engineer at Shell. And in my free time, I like traveling a lot. I do a lot of hiking, and I have a 9-year-old cat named Kitten.
Awesome. Where has been one of your most favorite places to travel recently?
Recently, well, my sister and I just went to Italy, and I think that's probably one of my favorite places, not just recently, but ever. We really liked Rome a lot. So all the pasta and all the pizza you could possibly want, and all the gelato. Yeah, a lot of fun.
That's amazing. I think we could all use some gelato on these hot summer Texas days.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Emily.
Yeah, so I'm Emily LeMay. I use she, hers pronouns, and I am also a deep water completions engineer at Shell. I actually took a little bit of a different route to get here. I was a mechanical engineering major in college at UT. So I think we'll share a bit more about pathway in this webinar. But yeah, I graduated in 2015, and I've been at Shell ever since. And hobbies, Mackenzie stole mine because I was going to say traveling and hiking as well. I'll say I enjoy traveling and hiking with my husband, and we have 2 dogs, Astro and Maggie. So that's fun.
We got cats over here, dogs over here. I'll ask you the same question, Emily. Where's maybe one of your favorite places that you've maybe more recently traveled?
I don't know about recently with with COVID, but I'll say my favorite place of all time was New Zealand. That was incredible.
Oh my goodness, that does sound incredible. And that's they've got a lot of water that's in my mind. So again, water goes nicely with this heat. Gelato goes nicely with this heat. So those are both good places maybe for us to at least dream visit on these hot summer days.
That's right. And it's winter there now. So
oh my goodness, even all the better, all the better. That's awesome. Well, again, thank you both for joining us, and thank you to Shell. Shell, as I mentioned, has been one of our longtime camp supporters and supporting our high school seniors that are coming in to try to understand what is engineering and what are those options and career options and pathways during the summer, but then also, of course, many of our current student programs. So I want to hear a little bit more from each of you. How did you get into this career path? Can you talk a little bit about what your pathway did look like? Because you both have said you ended up kind of in the same type of role, but with different pathways to get there. Either one of you can start.
I can start. So I grew up in Houston, I grew up in Sugar Land, so I think I was kind of always surrounded by oil and gas. And like a lot of people that end up in engineering, I loved math, I loved science, I loved puzzles and problem solving. So I knew I wanted to do engineering, and I think just by nature of where I was, Houston, Texas, it made sense for me to try petroleum engineering. And then for getting to Shell, I didn't really know what to expect, I think, as a career whenever I went into petroleum engineering. I didn't know like what that outcome looked like. So I did a lot of activities and different outreaches with companies and stuff during my time at UT. And one of the things that I did that I really enjoyed was I went to the Shell drilling and production camp that they put on during winter break whenever I was there, but I think Shell does it at different times during the year. And you got to see a lot of like the offshore equipment and learn about drilling and development wells and stuff. And I just had a lot of fun, and I thought it was really cool. It was very different than a lot of other things that people work on, right? You're drilling in thousands of feet of water. I love being by the water, so just the idea of being in the ocean as a job sounded really cool. And so I ended up applying for Shell. I got an internship with them in deep water drilling. And after my internship, I came back full time, and I've been here ever since.
You actually got to do a camp when you're in college. So that camp experience doesn't quite end, and that learning doesn't quite end when you head into college. So did you know, so you didn't necessarily know all along that this was what you wanted to do. But how did maybe you decide between, petroleum engineering was the right major along your way?
So I think, like I said, growing up in Houston, knew a lot of people in oil and gas, and they all seemed to really like their jobs. One of my best friends in high school, her dad worked for BP his entire career. And so we would talk about it, and he got to do a lot of traveling, which obviously I said I love to travel. So I was really excited about working for a job that would give me the opportunity to go around the world and see different places and meet different people. And so I really wanted to do an industry that was global, and petroleum offers a lot of opportunity for that. And then I loved chemistry. That was one of my favorite classes in high school. And petroleum engineering is a lot of fluids. Obviously, you're working with oil and gas. And so being able to work with like chemical compounds and chemical compatibility and stuff like that really interested me. So that's how I landed on petroleum.
That's awesome. So also getting to tie those interests, that chemistry interest, but also that potential travel interest in that major that you had.
Yeah, and I will say one more thing. I also did a renewable energy project in my high school. I was part of the Green Club is what we called it, and we put solar panels on the high school roof. And so that kind of gave me a fascination in energy. It was really cool to me that I was helping or working on a project that would help provide power, like something that we all need so much of, but we don't have to think about. And working in petroleum engineering, I do that on a daily basis. It's like the behind the scenes of how we all like have our modern day life work.
That's awesome. So really being able to see this is what I'm working on, and this is how it's impacting my world and making my world a better place, which is what engineers strive to do. That's awesome. Thanks, Mackenzie. What about you, Emily, and your different twisty path?
That's right. My journey, I guess, I'll start back in high school as well. So I didn't know I wanted to be an engineer until I actually went to a women in engineering program camp called, at the time, it was, I think it's probably pretty similar to the one you host now. It's called, at the time, CEO, Consider Every Option. And so it was different majors focused on each day. And whenever we got to the mechanical engineering one, I was just fascinated by how diverse it was and how many different things you could do with that degree. And so that's really what drew me to it, as well as just like tying it to the physical world. I loved physics. So I thought that was a really natural path. And so that's how I ended up in mechanical engineering. Going into college, I didn't know I wanted to be in the energy industry. I grew up just north of New Orleans. So I did have kind of a similar experience as Mackenzie, as far as like having family friends who had worked in the industry. But I think what really drew me to it was once I got into UT, I really loved planning projects and being and managing projects just through the organizations I was involved in. And so the first internship offer I got was with an oil and gas company, and it was in project management. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's see what this is all about. Let's try it out. And I got in, and so I learned, the basics of project management, cost scheduling, benchmarking, all of that. But then I also got a really good and deep appreciation for how technically challenging and exciting the offshore world was. I mean, when you see these platforms floating in the Gulf of Mexico, your first thought is how? Like, how is that possible? That's an amazing feat of engineering. And so after my first internship, I really wanted to dive into that more. So I worked at another oil and gas company the next summer, where I was a deep water facilities engineer. And that was the first time I traveled offshore, and I absolutely loved it. And so I was managing these small projects, but then I was there, like able to see them execute in real time. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so whenever I got my offer from Shell as a completions engineer, what really sold me was they're like, you're going to do a year-long field assignment. Was actually 2 years, but doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, offshore, and you're going to work out there, you're going to live out there, and then you'll have 2 weeks off. And I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. Like, sign me up, I'm there. And so that's what led me here today.
That's awesome. And we're going to dive into some of that a little bit more, but I wanted to go back to a couple of the things that both of y'all said as you were trying to think about those majors in college. Mackenzie, you mentioned really liking chemistry, and Emily, you really mentioned liking physics. And I think that's sometimes one of the ways that we counsel students to think about which majors might fit best with them. With chemistry, maybe the petroleum engineering, chemical engineering, maybe even parts of biomed engineering might be a better fit. Whereas if physics is your strong suit and your interest, then mechanical engineering, electrical, computer engineering, structural engineering, and civil engineering might be a better fit. But that either way you go, no matter which engineering major you choose, you may end up in the same place, or you can end up in the same kind of industry. And I think this heads kind of into my next question for you. What does your work look like? You both are coming at it with your different degrees. What does engineering work look like, coming at it from that petroleum perspective and then from that mechanical perspective? And maybe talk through a project or some experiences that you've had that can give us a little bit more insight into that.
I can go first. I think the exciting thing about our jobs is it does look different every day, because we are in our current roles, we're planning wells, and we're planning them, and then we're executing them. So whenever you're in that execution phase, anything can happen. You can go into a day thinking that you'll be in project planning meetings, thinking that you're going to be working with contractors on making sure their equipment's lined up, making sure their equipment's lined up and it's ready to go, and integrating with the asset to develop the best well type. But then you get a call from the rig, and that totally goes out the window, right? If something unexpected happens, that's your immediate focus. And so I think it's really dynamic. It's dynamic and it's exciting and it's fast paced. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with Emily. It's different every day, which I love. It's different every day, and it's also different every project. So you're never really doing the same thing twice. I just actually recently finished the field assignment that Emily was talking about. And so when I think of like an experience that really embodies petroleum engineering for me, it was my offshore field assignment. So I was out there for over 2 years, and you do rotations. So I was doing 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and you'd be up first thing in the morning and you'd be working straight through 12-hour shifts, and it was constantly busy, constantly calling people. You're on the rig floor, you're measuring casing, you're strapping lengths, you're doing tallies to figure out how long the pipe is going to be. And as we drill to a different depth, what does that look like? And how do we have to change the pipe that we're putting down hole? And how are we managing like fluid interfaces as we're pumping down hole, trying to manage pressures? And so it's very, especially being on the rig, it's very hands-on. You're right there in the heat of everything. And so it's very exciting, but it's also, you learn so much from being in the field versus like in the office. And so I think for me, like that was like a really eye-opening experience to how much has to go on to execute the stuff that we're writing in the office.
So I'm gonna put a link in the chat for folks, and it shows on this page, this is a Shell page that shows deep water, which I'm assuming that's part of what y'all are talking about, and it shows the rig. Because I don't know, and I'm assuming maybe our attendees don't know, can you maybe talk a little bit more like what are we seeing? What is this rig? What does that mean to be out there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks at a time? Where do you live on that thing? How does that work? And what is it trying to do? What are you trying to do out there?
I'm opening the link to see what y'all are looking at. Okay, yeah, so I was on a drill ship. So there's a few different types of rigs. You can be on a production platform, which are the ones that actually have oil coming to surface, and they're producing the oil. I was on a drill ship, which means it's an actual ship. It's floating, you can drive it. A lot of people are really fascinated when they find out that the rig can move. So if there's a hurricane or something, we can pick up, leave, come back later. So we have a captain on board, we have a full Marine crew. So there's like the rig part, and there's a separate accommodations unit. So on one side of the rig that is not going to have like the heavy machinery and stuff is the accommodations unit, so that you don't have to wear PPE, personal protection equipment, when you're walking around. And so there's rooms, usually double rooms. So there's 2 beds in each room, and mine had like lockers, and then it has like an attached bathroom. There's a gym. My rig actually had 2 gyms. We were very lucky. That's not very common. There's like a game room, and then there's a cafeteria. And so it's just kind of like, I guess, almost like a summer camp facility. I don't know if that's like a good analogy, but it has like, little small rooms for you and the little bunk beds and stuff. And that's where you're living. And then the day-to-day work, we're drilling wells. So you're on the ship, and the office and the engineers in the office send out project plans on how we're going to get to, it can be 20,000 feet below surface, right? That we're drilling these wells to try to get into a reservoir to produce oil. So what does that look like? We have to do all the measurements with equipment. So there's boats coming out. The way we get groceries is by a boat too. We have a once a week grocery boat. By the end of the week, the bananas are looking a little brown. So that was always, was always ready for the new groceries to come in. So I guess, I think summer camp might be the best way to explain it, but without like actually seeing it, I don't know that I like ever would have been able to imagine what it actually is. I don't know, Emily, if you have any other better analogy.
No, that's a pretty good analogy. I was going to say cruise ship, but not as glamorous. So I worked part of my field assignment on a drill ship like Mackenzie just came from, and then the other half on a platform like this shown in this picture right here. So there's a drilling There's a rig, as well as there's all the production facilities and capabilities on it as well. And so that's kind of how it's divided up into modules. So you'll have your production module, there's like a fluids module, which holds all of our mud or our brine that we're using to drill and complete these wells. And then there's the rig module, of course, which has the rig. And then there's a blast wall that separates all of that from where you're going to be living and staying. And so in that is exactly the same as what Mackenzie described. Your accommodations, your bunk beds, your shower, your game room, your exercise equipment. We had a pretty good gym. I was on Olympus TLP, and so that was pretty good gym. I also had my own bathroom, which was, not everybody gets their own, so that was a blessing as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I love the way, just thinking about how you're talking about the ship in and of itself even being constructed. That's an engineering feat in and of itself, right? Where you have this whole area that is protected and safe from a living quarter standpoint, and then this whole production side of the ship that is there to do the work and to drill the oil. So a whole engineering design challenge in and of itself there to make that thing float, as you said, Mackenzie, and be able to move when it needs to move. So that's phenomenal. And I love that summer camp analogy, or the cruise ship, not as glamorous. That works too, because I think that does kind of give people a sense of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, when you talk about it being an engineering feat that those things float with the production platforms, it's been explained to me more than once, and I can still not wrap my head around how that thing floats in the Gulf of Mexico. It's just, yeah, it's
we need
incredible.
all kinds of engineers to figure that stuff out. So that's amazing. Well, let's shift gears for just a moment and talk about professional skills, because that is definitely something that our students and some of our camps have also been working on, that engineering, design, thinking, problem solving skills. And this week we're thinking about quality work with agility, and thinking about how do we quickly and agilely adjust so that we can deliver quality work in what we're doing. And you both talked about how every day is a little bit different. So I'm assuming that professional skill of delivering quality work with agility comes into play probably almost every day with you at Shell. Can you talk about how that might come into play, or what that looks like for you? Emily, you want to start? Or Mackenzie, sorry.
I can start. Yeah, so I think that agility skill is so important because, these vessels, they're not cheap. They're about $1 million per day. And so you need to make decisions very quickly. But things change all the time. And so that's why I think, along with agility, you need to have those supporting qualities of first anticipation, like knowing what could change, what you could encounter that could involve you going a different pathway, and then also adaptability, being able to be flexible and not taken aback and kind of in panic if things change. I think those are really two big qualities. And I'll give you an example of a project that I was working on. It was for Ursa TLP. It was an Ursa completion well. Which if you can Google Ursa TLP, it looks like the one that's on the screen. And so the entire time we were planning this well, we were planning it for about 1.5 years. And the entire time we were planning towards a 2-zone completion. So 2 oil bearing zones, we're going to run equipment to be able to produce from 2 zones. But the assets of the geophysicists, the petrophysicists, the geologists, et cetera, always kind of were maybe a little bit skeptical if that second zone was really going to come in or not. And so rather than waiting for that to happen, because whenever you drill the reservoir section, there's only about a week until I'm running the completion into the well. And so rather than waiting for that realization, I planned for that realization. And so it requires an entirely different set of equipment. And so I had that all lined up. It requires a different well schematic. So had that lined up. It requires different programs, had that lined up. And so sure enough, whenever they drilled it and I got the call, that, and they're showing me the log like, oh, nope, that's water. We don't want that. The only one oil zone. It was rather than it being a wild rush and days and nights of rework, it was just a few quick phone calls to put those contingencies in motion. And yeah, so that's an example there. So Mackenzie.
Yeah, so like Emily said, with what we do, there's a lot of unknowns whenever you're doing all the planning work. So when I think about coming out of college, in college, you're given assignments, everything has a right answer, right? And you're looking for perfection. And so when I think about delivering quality work with agility, and what I struggled with personally coming out of college is that want for things to be perfect. But in our day-to-day role in our planning and our projects, it can't be perfect. There is no perfect, right? We don't have all the data. We don't have the data until the last minute maybe, and you have to plan with the data you do have. So I think for me, what that looks like is accepting good enough rather than looking for perfection all the time. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
I love that. And I think you both hit on some important things there. And I'll start with what you just said there, Mackenzie. I think that understanding that you have to take what you have and make your best educated guess. And as an engineer, you're problem solving all the time and trusting that you maybe have the skills and the abilities to move forward with good enough. And that is good enough. And that's going to get you where you need to go. And then Emily, you also mentioned working with all these different people and all these different types of other scientists or engineers or professionals doing their work, and how that comes into play in delivering a project or delivering quality work. And that can force you to have to adjust things, and again, do things where it's good enough so that it hits what all the different folks need or the timeline that you have, but maybe isn't always perfect. And I love that's kind of an interesting way to think about delivering quality work with agility. So I'm going to give the heads up to our participants. We're going to move to your questions here after I ask this last question to Mackenzie and Emily. So please throw in your questions to the Q&A about their college experiences or choices of major, or about Shell, or their any of the things that they've talked about in the Q&A, and we'll get to those next. My last question that I'm going to throw your way is that we've talked a lot about all kinds of different skills, this professional skill of delivering quality work with agility. You each talked about kind of project management skills, your engineering skills, the skill to believe that good enough is good enough. How do you gain confidence in that? How do you, gain these skills that you are learning besides just going to college and getting that degree? How do you gain those skills and this confidence?
I think going to the field was one of the most important parts of that development, because you can talk about it, but until you see it and you're there and you're witnessing the quick decisions and having to make those quick decisions on a daily basis, that's how you get comfortable with it. But I wouldn't say that's the only way you can gain that experience is through experience, right? There are, luckily, fortunately for us, there are so many engineers that have been working with our company for 20 plus, 30 plus years, and as well as foremen who are offshore who have really seen it all. And so talking with them and really looking to them as technical mentors, as personal mentors is really, I think, where you get a lot of that skill as well.
Yeah, relationships is definitely a big part of it, and just having mentors or experienced engineers that you can bounce ideas off is really important. I think also, like Emily said, experience, that's not something you can necessarily, obviously you can't get it overnight, but practice is a big one. And I think allowing yourself to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the more that you put yourself in situations where you're a little bit uncomfortable, the more that becomes normalized for you, and the more that you're able to challenge yourself and remind yourself that whenever you have challenges, in the past, you've been able to figure it out. And so now you'll be able to figure it out as well.
I love that. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question to you both. So, because you talked about some of the steps to maybe gain this confidence, I'm assuming, but maybe you can talk about it, does Shell, when they hire you, expect you to know all of this stuff? You've just gotten this degree. Are you expected to know it all? You went into these majors in college. Did you have times where, you maybe had that struggle of, I don't really know this. Am I in the right spot? And how did you maybe get past that? So those are actually, I guess, two questions.
Yeah, so me coming from a mechanical engineering background, I had no idea what a well even looked like until I asked someone to draw it out for me. I was like, oh, okay, this all makes sense. It looks like a a reverse skyscraper. Okay, I get it now. But yeah, again, I think to your question, Trisha, on how you on what's expected, absolutely not, right? Everyone comes, they hire you for your problem solving skills and your ways of working. They don't hire you for your technical skills. They will teach that along the way. Shell has a really good training program. That was one of the things that drew me to it, to the company, and it kind of differentiated it from other companies, is that it was very formalized. And not only that, but you came in right away, you have a buddy who's someone that you can ask questions to that are non-technical, but they can be technical, but just more about general Shell things. And then a technical mentor they'll assign you as well, to be able to ask those more detailed questions about your specific role and your specific engineering type.
Yeah, you asked if we had that times when we didn't know what we were doing and felt like we didn't know anything, right? Whenever we came from college, and I'm like, I still have those times. There's times I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. And so I think, yeah, if I had realized right out of college that they didn't expect me to know everything, that would have taken a lot of stress off myself. I think that was an expectation I put on myself to feel like I had to know everything, but they really don't. And like Emily said, Shell has so many people that are willing to help you at every step of the way. And honestly, whenever you first come in from college, it's the best time, because since no one expects you to know anything, you can ask every little question and no one thinks twice about it. So like the opportunity for learning is incredible. Like you'll never get that opportunity again. So it's definitely in your internships and early career, you need to take advantage of that and ask all the questions you can while everyone, expects you to not know anything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we put those, as you said, Mackenzie, we kind of put those expectations on ourselves sometimes, that we have to know it all, but no one knows it all. We're all learning all the time, and we have those kind of never-ending moments of, oh my goodness, okay, am I supposed to know this? Do I not? How do I ask the question now? And being comfortable asking those questions, the more you practice at that, the better you are, and the more you'll keep asking those questions. So the confidence will come eventually. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Sachi for questions, and we've got a few minutes for some questions from folks, and before we wrap things up, Sachi.
Yeah, so we had a couple questions come in. One of them is, do you work with anyone who doesn't have an engineering degree or an engineering background, and how much of your job involves interacting with non-engineers?
Go ahead, Mackenzie. I feel like you're going to take the same example as me.
Yeah, so I was thinking, once again, of offshore. Almost everyone that you're working with offshore does not have an engineering degree, and a lot of times they don't have a college degree at all. The foremen you're working for, your direct supervisors. So when you're offshore, 100% of your time is spent working with people that don't have an engineering degree, and that carries over into the office, because when you're in the office, you're constantly, in contact with the people offshore. You're getting their insight. You're figuring out how operations feels about what you're planning and how it would actually work on a rig. So I think that's one of the big challenges of working offshore, is the difference in working relationships and how people communicate and how their backgrounds and what they know, and like generation gaps and stuff like that. And that's probably like one of the best professional skills that I got while working offshore, was learning to work with people of all different backgrounds, with all different insights and experiences.
My example is the exact same. So Sachi, if you want to maybe go to the next one, or if there's a follow-up to that one.
Yeah, I just thought this question was interesting because I'm not an engineering major. I'm actually a public health major. So I do work with WiSTEM, so we do a lot of engineering stuff. But I always think it's really interesting to ask the panelists and the people who come in, like, do you work with any non-engineers? Because I'm not one. So yeah. And then another question that we have is, who were some of your mentors or inspirations or people who guided you to where you are today?
I think my I think one of my two, I would say my two, I guess, guiding forces on like how I guess I got into engineering was first my papa, so my grandfather. He was a natural gas engineer, which is not a major anymore. But he worked for Saudi Aramco. He worked in Saudi Arabia. My mom actually and my aunt both grew up in Saudi Arabia. Um, a- and and so he was like he's a big inspiration for me because I would grow up hearing the stories of them living in Saudi Arabia and the work that he did and working with all the different people and the different culture. And I thought that was really inspiring and cool. And, probably drew me to the energy industry as well because he worked in the energy industry as well. And then the second would be my aunt. So just having my parents are not engineers, neither one of them. My mom's a lawyer, my mom's an accountant, my dad's a lawyer. So I didn't have someone in my immediate family that was an engineer. But my aunt was an engineer. She was a chemical engineer. She went to UT. And so just having that role model as a woman in engineering, and someone that I could see visibly in that role, I was like, I could do it too.
So I also can think of two. So the first one at UT, I had a professor, Dr. Van Oort, and he's actually the drilling engineering professor. And he used to work at Shell actually in deep water, drilling wells, just like I do now. And hearing his experiences at Shell and being able to talk to him through that recruiting process gave me a lot of insight and, gave me a lot of confidence in myself to be able to go do this role. And when I struggled in my internship, not sure, like we talked about earlier, if I was going to be able to do it, if this project was something I could step up to, he was always there to encourage me. And, he saw, I guess, he saw a future for me that he was like, I can see you doing this. And he encouraged me along every step of the way. And we've stayed in contact since school. And so just always being able to catch up with him and, I guess, be reminded of, what his career was and that's an opportunity I could have too has been really good for me. And the second example I would say is my sister. So my sister's not an engineer. She's actually in sales. She actually has like 7 jobs. She does everything. But having that female in my life, role model in my life, that my sister is such a strong-minded woman and like she believes fully that she can do anything. And I believe that too. And I think that came down to me because she also believed I could do anything. And so having that energy and just being encouraged along every step of the way that, even if I'm surrounded by all males, I belong here, I deserve to be here, and I'm here because I can add value. And having that encouragement my whole life just has really, I guess, helped me end up where I am.
Right. It's great to hear that y'all have some good role models. And then finally, I'd like to ask y'all for one piece of advice for participants considering the energy industry for a career or engineering as a major in college.
I can go first. I think a big one for me, find a female mentor. I think having an example of like someone that's like you that has done this, that has made it through, that has, broken the glass ceiling, so to speak. It's a reminder that you can do it too. And then also a lot of the problems that may be specific to women or that you may come into, or like relationship problems at work or how you might be treated, having someone that you can go talk to and having a trusted person that you can talk to about those experiences that are unique to you as a woman and a woman engineer is really helpful in encouraging you on the days that you might feel a little bit more discouraged.
That's a good one. I think it took me a while to come up with this, but I would say don't be intimidated. There's some people that will act like they know it all. They don't know it all. You may not realize it at the time, but once you get further along in your career, you're like, oh, everyone's just trying out things and seeing how they work. No one knows everything. And that's kind of what Mackenzie alluded to earlier, right? Being comfortable with, imperfection. So that would be my piece of advice. For, I guess, sort of the energy industry, it is, I would say, it is a very exciting industry to be in, regardless of if you're in oil and gas, if you're in offshore wind, if you're in solar. We need energy. The energy demands are not going away. And I think we can all see that in our day-to-day lives. So if that's something that interests you, if that's, if that's something that interests you and that you are passionate about, like what Mackenzie mentioned, of delivering a resource that everyone uses every day, follow that for sure.
And speaking to that, Emily, actually, also, I know we're all like worried about climate change and the energy transition. So if you're interested in energy, like Emily said, energy isn't going away. It might change, but you can still have a career in energy, even at our age, even 40 years, 50 years, we're going to need energy for forever. And so it might not necessarily be a full career in oil and gas, but you do have a career in energy and providing that, because the need and the demand for that is not going anywhere. It's only going to go up.
All right, thank you both so much, and I'll pass it back to Trisha.
Thank you. And I love that kind of thinking about how we wrap this up, is that it's ever changing, no matter what that industry is. Energy in particular is that, with these types of degrees, having those STEM degrees, you gain that skill of delivering quality work with agility that we were talking about, that lets you shift and change and problem solve, no matter where that industry might take you. So I love thinking about the energy industry, the importance of it, and the demand for it, and the need for more STEM folks heading into that. In particular, our women, so that we have more role models to continue to bring more into this space. So thank you again. I'll just give a final reminder, and maybe Sachi can throw them in the chat one more time, the FabFems.org website, to continue to find those female STEM role models and more that are in the energy industry, and to check our YouTube channel again for our FabFems Friday series, as well as other STEM role models that you might want to check out. So thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, Emily, for sharing with us today. Thank you, Sachi, for managing our Q&A so fabulously. And again, thank you to Shell for being such an important and longtime partner for Women in STEM and our summer camp programs and our FabFems Friday. We look forward to seeing everybody next Friday for our final FabFems Friday of the summer. And watch your email and social media for more details. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day and weekend.
Thank you, Trisha.
Thanks,
Bye,
Trisha.
all.